And I discovered that in talking to many of you and many of the people who are going to be presenting over the next 3 days. And I think, look, we all know that CPG in many ways saw all this coming, but among all of the different business categories, it was seen as the last bastion that digital disruption was going to reach. It clearly has reached it now. Obviously, the consumer journey has become deeply fragmented and complicated by online sources, by geo-targeted marketing, by mobile apps, by intermediaries of all sorts, including everything from delivery providers now to direct-to-consumer native CPG brands themselves. But of course, that's nothing new for CPGs. You've always had a series of intermediaries that you've had to deal with. This is a new family of them, a new set of challenges, but what's interesting about the digital channel for CPGs is these new opportunities for now being able to get closer to your consumers than you ever had before. In fact, that's, I think, one of the most interesting things about a lot of the presentations we're going to be seeing over the next few days are the creative solutions and the creative ways in which brands are trying to find that direct-to-consumer link. So, for instance, today and tomorrow, we're going to be hearing from both Pepsi and Heinz. They're going to be talking about the ways in which they're building their infrastructure to try to get a set of tools and data that now can not only reach their consumers more directly, but in a much more targeted fashion than ever before, move beyond those batch and blast mass marketing campaigns that really typified CPGs for generations, but also personalize in a way that they never have before. We'll talk with one of the higher profile direct-to-consumer brands about what the DTCs know that maybe other marketers don't know. We're going to be talking tomorrow with Georgia Pacific. They'll be talking about the ways in which data and targeting is being used, especially in this new generation of retailers who have themselves become publishers, not only Amazon, but of course Walmart, Target, and others. We're going to be hearing from Pilgrim's Chicken on how it's learning how to use Amazon data, but also the Amazon Direct channel to advance its brand. Avocados of Mexico will be talking about what a data-driven CPG digital-first company looks like and how it's building it internally. So we'll be seeing a lot of creative solutions to this challenge and this opportunity of reaching consumers directly. But what's interesting is this is all happening, of course, within a larger environment, a larger challenge that's a branding problem. And that's why it's appropriate to do this within the matrix of our traditional Brand Insider Summit, is that building brand is one of the most challenging things right now in any category, and especially for CPGs. We've all seen the Havas Meaningful Brand Study that shows that for most of us, 77% of our brands could go away tomorrow and we wouldn't care. There's a chilling disconnect between the brands a lot of us think we're building and the ways in which it's really resonating with users, the value that they're bringing to it. And remember, brand, especially CPG brands, have a century-long legacy. This all started, the whole idea of branding consumer product goods started in the late 19th century. It was part of the rise of mass merchandising and mass production. As soon as people started losing touch with their local markets and had that understanding of where products came from, as soon as we started making nationwide distribution systems and advertising systems, branding was the thing that solved for a key problem: trust, quality, safety. That's what brand did. That was the story of branding in the 20th century. And there's a real key question, a large existential question that faces all of us in the 21st century. What does brand solve for now? As things become commoditized, as things like safety and quality now become widely available, what does brand do? What do we try to do with it? One answer that some people think is it provides meaning. But there are a lot of other possibilities. And so I'm really eager to hear from another set of presentations that we're going to be hearing across these next few days about this issue of brand and brand building. We're going to be hearing from companies like Land O'Lakes, like Rust-Oleum, also from Hubble, from Organic Valley, from direct-to-consumer brand Pour Moi, from Jack Link's, about how it's solving for this larger issue of branding and making brands meaningful. But I want to start, as we do with all of our summits, with you. Over the last few days, I've been asking I asked all of the brands coming some general survey questions. We like to start all of these summits with the voice of the brands themselves, to get an idea, to get a sense of what people are thinking and what their attitudes are, because a lot of this is going to go on in discussions among you. I have much more material that I can cover in just the next few minutes. We will be posting all of this online, so you'll be able to get it later. But I asked everybody, what's the most challenging change in the consumer journey for your marketing plan? And of course, we heard a lot about fragmentation, and in fact, we're going to be talking about that today in our first panel, media fragmentation, but how it's harder to choose where to place limited budgets. Most challenging aspect is that there are now so many disparate channels, it's hard to drive relatively efficient awareness. The ways in which we moved away from that broad national TV campaign, fragmentation has also created a tremendous challenge when it comes simply to efficiency and what tactics to use and how you can actually disperse all that effort across so many different channels. Making those decisions is one of the things I think we'll be talking about a lot. This is an interesting one that I've actually been hearing a lot about, but I haven't seen a lot of solutions for, and that's mobile. That as we start moving towards those mobile screens, conversion rates on everything drop incredibly, and I've yet to see a lot of discussion about solving for mobile. Also, discovering on the other end, targeting, discovering the proper audiences to target and which platforms to use, as well as on the back end, attributing the value of all of these investments across the different channels. And of course, ultimately, it's the continued shift of power to the consumer, the ways in which the consumer and that consumer journey itself is fragmenting. People are coming to products in so many different ways, it's simply too difficult to track. I asked also, what new marketing channel you've been using that's proven the most successful for breaking through that brand clutter? And again, it's interesting the diversity of responses to this question. Everything from Instagram and Pinterest, a lot of interest now in out-of-home. Out-of-home for a number of CPGs is sort of replacing print as a great awareness builder. And TV, it can grab people in perhaps a more efficient way than even TV can. But also things like YouTube. Paid search, actually a number of people mentioned search. I thought it was really interesting, the analogy that one of you made of search to shelving in store. Being in the first 3 spots of search would be the equivalent of premium placement on shelf plus feature and display, like an end cap. And if you're not there, you might as well be back in the warehouse. Also, influencers. We're going to be talking about social, especially on day 3 with Rust-Oleum, but also the ways in which social can be used in a lot of different ways. Interesting comment here about affiliates. Again, I'm going to be putting this all online so that you can grab the whole deck later. Social has a lot of different dimensions. Social advocacy programs may not generate the most data, but it is perhaps the best quality because the participants are highly engaged. You can use it for lookalike modeling. And also people engaging in our, I asked here about particularly the question of first-party data. We're going to be taking that up at the top of tomorrow morning, the most successful ways in which people are gathering first-party data. Social is an interesting channel here, and again, I thought that was interesting that social, although it may not have the reach, renders some of the best quality data that can be used for modeling elsewhere. And it's interesting how, with all of the digital channels, there's still a lot of old school marketing that's going on here. Things like members-only sales, trialing, and also couponing, using that as ways to harvest first-party data. And then, of course, I had to ask about Amazon. We're going to be talking about Amazon in particular tomorrow, but whether it's a threat, whether it's a frenemy, whether it's a real partner. And of course, the answers were all over the map because the answer is all over the map with Amazon. It's an interesting distinction that one of you made here about how it's showing the greatest growth, but at the least profit among the other retailers. Again, great source of sales growth, but at the same time, it's opening up the path for competitors. And this will be somebody you'd be interested in speaking to who thinks that they've cracked the code on how to deal with Amazon. But also the other thing that we'll be talking about tomorrow is that new retailer as publisher inventory that Amazon also is now becoming such a force in online. This comment I found especially interesting. Amazon advertising is sucking budget away from other channels due to a need for defense rather than confidently profitable growth. That's interesting. But also the ways in which the Amazon DSP really is offering even CPGs a very strong offer. Then finally I asked, what's the most overhyped or disappointing channel or platform you've tried recently? And again, quite a diverse set of responses. Native advertising, hard to declare successful. Shoppable ads, there's been some disappointment there. Walmart Media Group, there's been some dissatisfaction there with the ways in which it's shifted, and especially it's the quality of its customer service. Again, tomorrow we'll be talking about some of the retailers as publishers. Twitter, programmatic, and I don't think this is one of the most interesting things that I saw here that really popped for me is I don't think this answer has changed in the past 10 years. Display advertising, that it's still hard to prove that it works. That's an amazing sentiment to me that I have heard voiced by a number of people over the years. And interestingly, especially among the direct-to-consumer brands, I've heard this most often, that display just doesn't work for them, and they don't understand entirely how it works for anybody else. And finally, a couple of comments about voice search. Voice search, interesting, very promising, but according to most people in the industry, still something that's rudimentary, hard to break through. There's really no way for a brand to get through the clutter of voice. But also at the same time, the habits just aren't there that most of you and most of us who have Alexa know that we check it for weather and time and maybe to play music and a podcast. But as a route towards actually discovering product, still not there yet. Anyway, these are just, I just sort of wanted to seed the conversation because that's really what this event is about, is a conversation. A lot of the content that we put on up here really is the beginning of a conversation that's eventually really comes to life in the roundtables that happen in every morning. So let me give you a couple of little summit rules for those of you who are new. How many of you are new to our summits? Great. You're going to enjoy this. It's a unique format. Everything that we do on stage is on the record. We're live streaming this over MediaPost, so if you have colleagues at home that you want to have tune in, ping them at home. We'll be archiving it. We'll be blogging it. We'll be reporting it. But then at noon, everything comes off stage and goes off the record. And that's where the roundtables really take this content and turn it into conversations that we think really, in our experience, go on throughout the afternoon, even when you're golfing or ATVing or taking the gondola up the mountain. It's in these roundtables that really this stuff comes to life. I can't stress enough how important the roundtables are to this process. This is really where you will really get to know one another, extend these conversations, and it's the real meat of our summits. We've been doing this for about 15, 16 years. This is our first one focusing on the CPG category, but we've been doing this format and been talking with brands across a number of categories for a number of years. The format really works. Enjoy Tahoe. How many of you are just coming to Tahoe for the first time? This is one of the coolest places that we come. Let me tell you, the Rat Pack had casinos right down there. If you take the right bike tour, they will tell you where the bodies are buried along the river. Any of you who are old Godfather fans, Fredo is in the middle of that lake. You don't get cooler than that, so really enjoy Tahoe. And thanks for coming. As I said, I'm really looking forward to this, talking to all the brands who are here, all the stories that you guys have to tell. This is going to be really fascinating for me. And we're going to start with, of course, one of the iconic CPG brands in the U.S., PepsiCo. And the ways in which PepsiCo is taking data and creating internally its own analytics engine, so that it can equip its own marketers with sets of tools, audience targeting, so that it can bring CPG marketing beyond the mass merchandising that we have always known and towards a much more personalized and targeted process. To share this, we have Abish Jadan, who is the Senior Director of Consumer Data and Digital Strategy at PepsiCo. This is a newly created global role for him, and part of his job is to create a scaled, owned and operated solution that integrates the breadth and the depth of various data signals that Pepsi gathers. Also with him is Kevin Moeller, who is also PepsiCo, is the Head of Media Insights and Analytics. His job is to measure these capabilities across all of the PepsiCo North American assets and to improve accountability and performance. Please welcome both of them.
Okay, we're good to go. Welcome. Thank you, everyone. We're so excited to share some of our journey with you guys. Thanks to MediaPost for having us. Hopefully, by the end of the next 20 minutes, you'll come on a little journey with us of where we've been in the last couple years and where we think we are going in the future. Okay, so the tour guides for this journey, my buddy here, Abe, who's the head of Global and Consumer Insights, Global Consumer Data across all of PepsiCo. And I'm Kevin Moeller. I lead Media Insights and Analytics for the North America sectors. So just show of hands, anyone recognize this brand? Anyone? Okay. So we are Pepsi. I should say, I've been with PepsiCo for about 9 months. So in PepsiCo world, that's very, very early days. And I came and I wanted to work at Pepsi. And what I quickly realized is, especially on our beverages side, it's not just Pepsi. We have tons of iconic brands that are in the homes of millions of Americans every single day. Whether it's CSDs, whether it's our tea partnerships or our coffee partnerships, as well as getting into the water space as well. But we also have our friends at Frito-Lay with, again, a ton of really iconic brands that are in most households in America. Then we also have some other really, really iconic brands out of our Chicago office in Quaker and Tropicana and Gatorade. But as the consumption patterns of Americans have changed, we've evolved our product offering for that change. So a lot of our products are fun for you. They're a snack or a drink that make you feel good. We also have a ton of brands that are new and up and coming in the space that are really good for you. And they represent a changing demand from consumers in America, like Bubbly and G0, as well as Stacy's and Sun Chips and Smart Food. We've also evolved from a strategic angle. You may have read a couple months ago, we closed an acquisition of a little company out of Israel called SodaStream. Again, this represents the changing strategy or the evolving strategy of PepsiCo into not just our historic legacy of snacks and bottled drinks, but really getting beyond the bottle. SodaStream also represents a strategic initiative that is very important to everyone at PepsiCo in our sustainability and ensuring that the world is focused on things like recycling and more environmentally safe areas. So we aren't just Pepsi, we are PepsiCo. We have roughly 22 or 23 brands that are over $1 billion in revenue. So we're not tiny, and it's still an important place for us to ensure that not just that we have had a great history and a great run, but that we future-proof ourselves, like all of you out there, for how the changing dynamics, especially in media and analytics, are bringing to the marketplace in the next couple years.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're good.
Thank you, Kevin. I think as everybody talked, Adam mentioned in the morning, Steve set it up a little bit. A lot of the challenges and dynamics that we're talking that are changing are are not necessarily unique to PepsiCo. They're also the similar challenges that we are facing. For years, I think a company like PepsiCo, we have been great with three levers of mass distribution, mass manufacturing, and mass communication. But we all know all of those dynamics are getting disrupted. The distribution channels, especially with delivery and e-commerce, are evolving really fast. Mass communication channels are evolving even faster speed. We now no longer have a captive audience. Gone those days when you could buy a TV ad and reach millions of people immediately and spike up your brand awareness. And in the world we live in now, you need to earn that attention. I think it's something that brands now have to earn because your consumer demands it. And as PepsiCo, we are acknowledging that. And as we are acknowledging that, we are also realizing that some of the reality of dynamics of external environments are evolving and changing more rapidly. It was mentioned already that retailers are almost becoming publishers and media networks. They are realizing the power of understanding consumer and consumer data and applying it in terms of ways how manufacturers like ours can reach. Subscription services, evolving cord cutting are all the factors that are affecting the scale and the reach that marketers like us used to have. So we need to adapt and we need to shift to that. Data restrictions, data breaches. Consumer is getting more conscious and aware of their rights of data. This puts us a little bit at a point where we need to take a step back and think what the future would be. As Kevin mentioned, the future proofing, we are completely looking at the future as something that we need to not only own, but create. And why do we need to create it? We need to create it for some of the obvious reasons that I think all of us believe that needs to be done. We want to be better targeting our consumers so we are really reaching the right person who matters. We really want to be personalized so we are talking the right message that matters to that consumer versus just talking to them. And then we want to be able to look at data, look at analytics in a way that are more meaningful at those KPIs that matter. Data is in our DNA. We are taking a step where we need to put data, consumer understanding to the core of what we do. How are we doing it? How are we doing it? How are we doing it? These are your consumers, and they have their motivations, their behaviors, their nutrition choices, their food and beverage choices. And if you understand them better, what they buy, where they buy, and also understand that why behind, for whom they're buying it, why they're changing their preferences, it not only fuels your marketing and advertising, what we are starting with, but ultimately fuels to that goal of being more consumer-centric, being more in the service of that consumer that we aim to be in. I'm going to show an example of how we are approaching it. Ultimately, creating this consumer data and drawing insights from it's really great, but how do you put it to practice? For us, ultimately, it means a fundamental shift from a brand-first to an audience-first approach. Historically, we have always created a number of brand campaigns. I'm a brand, and I need to create a campaign, and I need to reach as many people as possible so I can target them, and I can hope that they will go and buy my product. An audience-first approach is very different. It puts consumer first. It tries to take an attempt of understanding who these consumers are and why and what they like about your brand. What are their motivators? Here's an example of Quaker Overnight Oats. As we were launching this brand, as we were launching this innovation, we collected this data and we tried to analyze and harmonize and used real data scientists, resources, and capabilities to understand different motivators and behaviors. Oats is not new, but overnight oats was a new behavior. People were getting onto this new trend of creating oats overnight and using it as for their breakfast. What we realized was there were different segments of audiences who were creating and getting onto that phenomenon for different reasons. There were people who were doing it for fitness reasons. There were people who were doing it for convenience because they're busy and they wanted something healthy conveniently in the morning. And there were people who were just identifying it as part of their healthy routine that they wanted it to be part of, which ultimately allowed us to look, rather than the broad demographic targeting of probably an age group and a particular gender to go after, to really leverage the power of data and create meaningful consumer segments. Each of these segments were rooted and backed by core insights, which ultimately were something that we integrated in our brief, in our story, in our message that we wanted to tell. And here's an example of how this audience-first approach is ultimately enabling into creative. Personalization is not new. Everybody wants to do personalization. But if you really understand that consumer, you can still be true to your messaging, stay core to that one common core message, but can still tweak to speak to that consumer more relevantly, to that one-to-one personalization that you could do. We are on this journey, but we have a long way to go, and Kevin will talk on our path.
Apparently, we're going to solve it, too.
Yeah.
So as Abe talked about, we are actively addressing some of the data issues that come with being a CPG company in general, not necessarily having all of the data about our consumers or about our sales that we would like at our fingertips. We're making huge strides in Abi's team, not just from a global perspective, but really pushing that down throughout the entire organization and really understanding more about who our target consumers are through this consumer data lake. But with that understanding of our consumers comes a responsibility for myself and my team and our broader organization to act on that data. So it's not just about capturing the right people at the right time, but what are we going to do with it? How are we going to act and improve our ROI? How are we going to improve our investments in the marketplace as a result of having more and better data? So we've taken a three-step approach at PepsiCo, and we are on a years-long journey. We're not solving this tomorrow, but if we don't attempt to solve it, we'll be left behind, and we know that, and so we are staying ahead of where the marketplace is to ensure that we are future-proofing ourselves for success. So we're building a tremendous amount of capabilities in-house, and this is really about a strategic shift to ensure that all of the data that Abe and his team capture and manipulate and manage and cleanse gets used in everything that we do. He talked about data is in our DNA, and we have to ensure that not just from a strategic angle, but from an execution and actionable angle, and a measurement angle, that data is intrinsic to who we are as marketers, and to hold ourselves accountable to the performance in market. It also allows us to control our own destiny. We have really, really, really strong partnerships with our media agencies and our creative agencies, and that's not changing. But what is changing is inside PepsiCo for us to act on and utilize the data through these new tools and capabilities that we're building to supplement some of the things that our partners historically that we have historically relied on our partners to do. It brings us to the table a little bit closer to that special relationship that a marketer and their agency have. We've also streamlined our process. So our structure, the fact that Abe and I are here together on stage, one representing global, one representing North America, I think is testament to how, as an organization, we have shifted some of the structure so that whether it's bred and born in North America and gets leveraged up through Abe and pushed out to the rest of the markets, or developed in some market that Abe works with closely, he brings it up, and then we embrace it from a North America standpoint. Those shifts in operational strategy allow us to really leverage the size and the scale that we bring to the marketplace with our $22 billion brands. And then also to ensure that, as we all know in this room, the marketplace is changing in terms of talent. It's really, really hard to retain top talent. It's really hard to get top talent in the first place. And so ensuring that not only are we working with our current staff, but bringing people in from the outside. I've been at PepsiCo for 9 months, 10 months maybe. And my background, I've never worked on the client side before. So I'm coming mostly from the media agency side. So bringing a different and unique perspective. And when we go out to hire into the marketplace to ensure that we are grabbing the right talent or taking the talent that we have in-house and cross-training them across a number of different disciplines, that gets us that much stronger as an organization so that we hear from different perspectives, different expertise, different points of view, so that together, when you get into a room, diversity of thought is extremely important to drive the entire ship forward. And so what are we going to do to ensure that we're leveraging all of the data that Avi and his team are working on? I had an old boss who said this to me once, and it took a little bit to resonate with me, but we can now do the things that we always wanted to do. So take a minute and just think about that. It may sound corny, it probably will, but if you can dream it and you can think about it through technology, through data, we can now do those things. And there's intrinsically a ton of problems when it comes to data, especially sales data in our industry. But we can't let that stop us from making progress. So I would challenge everybody in this room, if you have something, a project or a capability that you always wanted to build, that you wanted to bring to your boss or push down to your team, try it. Don't let the limitations of either the data or the infrastructure or your strategic development of your company, don't let that hold you back. Push yourselves, push your teams, because it's really an exciting time to be in media and analytics. I'm lucky enough to be in the space for over 15 years, and I can honestly say, like, where we were when I first started and did my first internship at Nielsen to where we are today, it's light years. It's massively different, and what the next 15 years are going to be, we probably can't even imagine. So I would challenge everyone in the room to just put on your positivity hat with all the limitations that I already spoke about, and ensure that if there's something that you want to do out in the marketplace, I'm sure through technology and data you can get 80% there, and that's 80% more than you were yesterday. So it's just always pushing it forward. So thinking about the limitations of our category specific to CPG, how can we leverage and embrace those challenges to our strategic advantage? And for us at PepsiCo, it's really a managed approach. It is a journey. It is not all complete today, but we are really far along from where we were 6 months ago and from where we were 6 months before that. And I expect 6 months from today, we'll be talking about different capability and tools. So the first thing is there's a lot of behavioral data out there, right? Especially digital. The great thing about digital is it produces data. Just the process and management of how media buys are executed and measured. We have a lot of signals in the marketplace for how a campaign is performing. So I would encourage you to act on those signals. Whether they're deterministic to sales, we'll get to that in a second. But if we know that we have CPM benchmarks and we're monitoring a campaign and the CPM benchmarks are higher than, our CPM in the marketplace is higher than our benchmarks, it's our obligation to act off of that data. We know we're not going to have a positive ROI if the CPM, if the costs are higher than what we anticipated them to be. That's simple math. That's not complex analytics. That's kind of common sense when it comes to how to evaluate media campaigns. Same thing with placements and media partners that you work with. Really hold them accountable and act on the data that is in front of you. Taking that a step further is we have a number of initiatives underway that will be released later in the year that look to understand the relationship to other metrics that can be captured in real time that we can use to identify, are they leading indicators to sales? Everyone in this room, all of the CMOs out there, that's what they care about. Everyone wants to build a brand. Everyone wants to drive the company forward. And they do so by ensuring that they've hit their sales numbers. If we can't get sales correlated to a campaign in real time, what can we do in real time? What can we capture in real time that we know is a leading indicator to performance from a sales perspective? And that could be identifying those behavioral metrics. It could be those brand health measures. So through whether it's AdWallet or other ad effectiveness studies in the marketplace, you can capture real-time exposure and brand health metrics as a result of that exposure. If we make that link then to sales and that relationship, we can then act on those longer-term brand building metrics with a knowledge of what they deliver in the short term for sales. The other thing is taking some historical analytic tools like marketing mix model and kind of flipping them on their head. Mix modeling is great. It's wonderful, actually, as a report card. It tells us all of the drivers of growth, how our campaigns performed, how our brands performed, given the spend and the campaign in the marketplace. Mix modeling has its drawbacks. It's 3 months delayed. It may not be able to get as granular as you would like to make optimizations against. So how can we take something that is historically, that is traditionally looking backwards and flip it on its head and use it to predict what is going to happen in the marketplace? And that's something that we've started to do to great success within the media and analytics team. The other thing is other types of advanced analytics. So looking at a paid, owned, earned, shared model. What is that relationship to what is that relationship of paid media to owned and shared and earned media? It's incumbent upon all of us with any media budget, let's maximize everything else before we actually start putting money into the marketplace. So how do you leverage your paid, or your owned, your shared, your earned? What is that relationship to driving sales? And how can paid help amplify some of those channels? We've also developed a technology using AI. And I know AI is the buzzword for the last 18 months, but this is AI. Actually analyzing creative to the most granular degree to predict how that creative is going to perform while it's in market, and then linking that back to some more standard analytic tools like marketing mix model, which then fuel the future understanding of how our campaigns are performing. So again, these are just a handful of things that we are doing within our walls and within with our partners, our media agency, our creative agency, and our third-party data partners to help really embrace the fact that we work in a very challenging category where where sales are not readily accessible in a real-time basis, and we have to be a little bit more creative in how we analyze campaigns and take action as a result of them. And then the last piece of this is Abe can solve our data problems. Thank you. My team can work to solve the analytic and measurement issues. But if we just partner together and exist in our little duo here, and we don't democratize the results, democratize analytics and data within the entire organization, then we failed. Because our goal is to put ourselves, and I'm going to say this lightly, is to put ourselves out of business so that our jobs become obsolete because we have taken the really advanced analytics that have existed in silos or existed within the analytics group or within the research or insights group or the data and MarTech group. And our goal is really to democratize that so that marketers who traditionally have been really focused on creative and building brands, that we give them the tools so that the fear behind data gets reduced, so that analytics that has been held historically within one group is now in the fingertips and the hands of all of our marketers. They're going to be able to make better decisions. They're going to be able to hold themselves accountable, and they're going to be able to work better with our creative partners, our media partners, and our other brand partners that we want to work with if we have democratized all, not just the results, but actually the capabilities and the tools that our teams are developing. And we're doing so through collaboration. So rather than working through meetings and setting up emails and, think about how much time is wasted throughout your day in either just setting up a meeting and trying to get on someone's calendar, or, hey, let's get everybody in the room and it takes 3 weeks to happen, and by that time, that real time is no longer real time, it's post-campaign. How do we fix that? So we're working with a very, very, very large computing software company that is working with us to develop a holistic user interface that all of the tools and capabilities that I kind of talked about sit within and are democratized to all of our marketers, not from a back office analytics data cruncher, but put in a way that's visually appealing, easy to understand, and has the capability to really, really change how they work from a workflow perspective, an accountability perspective, and really collaborate within their different groups.
Thanks.
So in the end, as we walk through this journey, there are two takeaways that I'll say we would love to leave you guys with. First, it's this mindset and mentality. So Kevin already talked about the strong collaboration that the different teams are having, and we're trying to grow it with the mentality of thinking what's next, what's the future. But it's the mentality of being a startup. It's the mentality of being in this mindset of that we need to create something for tomorrow. We need to be open and be comfortable with the failure. We need to be comfortable to go into the uncharted territories and do things that typically CPG companies are not known for, is basically what our journey is. As the slide says, it's a long journey. It's a multi-year journey that we ourselves are acknowledging.
We'll optimize that journey. We'll get there faster.
Exactly. We're trying to get there faster. And the second thing that I'll say, what Kevin touched upon, we fundamentally believe what capabilities, the technology, the data, and our evolution is not just limited to what the teams do, but also the processes, and bringing everybody along from an organization point of view is the fundamental shift that will help us get there. We don't kid when we say our hope is that that becomes the future of marketing. I personally really don't like the word digital marketing, because I think the word digital marketing should not exist in 5-10 years from now. That should just be marketing. And that's just the way how we should be doing. Because if you really understand, and this ambition we have, the C in the CPG stands for consumer. And if we don't really put that to the center and really build these processes and capabilities, we will not get there where we want to. We want to move from this mass reach approach to a truly predictive, hyper-personalized approach where we are really making those personalized one-to-one relevant connections with our consumer based on knowing who they are and using it in the entire ecosystem through an agile, technology-driven optimization process that helps us act faster and course correct that we historically are probably not very used to. With all of that, thank you so much for having us here.
Kevin. Kevin, Abhi, thank you very much. We have time for some questions. And again, tell us who you are and who you're with so we get to know you.
Stephen Winahan with Jebbit, and this question's for Abhi. Abhi, you had a slide up about knowing your consumer well, and you had different kind of buckets of kind of understanding, and you had things like values and beliefs and motivation. How do you today get that type of data from the consumers?
So it's a little bit of an ambition, and it's a little bit of a work in progress. As I was talking about, we do have access to some data. There is data. Targeting using data is not new to us, and it's our attempt to integrate it all together and use algorithms and data to better understand what we know. And especially as the landscape is changing, a lot of our D2C brands are evolving. It is helping us better understand consumer preferences. So it's a little bit of a journey. I don't necessarily have the exact way to define right now. We are ourselves building it.
Over here.
Hi, Dean Jackson, Life Extension, nutritional supplement company, South Florida. Question for either of you. Actually, two-part. I'll kind of cheat and throw in an extra question. But you mentioned the iterative process and AI to affect creative. I was just wondering can you just comment a little bit more about how that's executed? Is that through digital asset management, or is the machine learning kicking it back and you're creating manual creative, or is it really truly automated? And I guess the second part of the question is from how do you tie the brand awareness metrics to conversion or sales?
Sure. So I will answer your second question. That's what we're working on. So I think through a series of mixed models, secondary models, understanding not just correlation but causation, that's what we're attempting to do, is to really, and I think, to be honest, it's no one in the industry has been able to do this or had proven results that showed what brand metrics, whether it's awareness, it may not be awareness, probably where is awareness, how they correlate to sales and how you blend that understanding of what's happening in the short term and that's actually producing sales, and how you're building the brand in the long term, and what that relationship is. So it's an analytical challenge that we're really tackling. I do know that there's other industry organizations out there. I'll give a plug to Joel Rubenstein, who many of you may know, who is part of Wonks, is also working with the MMA for a similar type of project. So if there's any CPG marketers out there who want to get in on a broader industry-wide study, I would reach out to the MMA on something like that.
Kevin, Abhi, thank you very much. That was a great start, and we're going to continue this in the roundtables at the end of the morning. Thanks so much, guys. Let me ask Tim and our panel to come up, and we need to get some chairs for you guys. We're going to tease out one of Kevin's points, and one of the things that we saw in the survey about media fragmentation and the challenge of what the media plan looks like now for CPGs, making all of those choices, measuring the power of each of these channels that you're choosing, and the methods that you're using to make these decisions. To take up this question of branding in a performance era where all of the channels seem to be aiming you towards performance, but where do you make those choices between branding and performance within these different channels in this complicated media mix that we're looking at now? Tim Glover will be moderating this panel. He's a veteran of the Empower Agency, been there for over 15 years. While there, he's worked with brands like Jack Link's, like PetSmart, like Brooks, and Formica. Please welcome Tim and our first panel.
All right, good morning, everybody. So I always love panels because they're fun. You get to have several people, which, as you noticed, there's only 3 of us up here. One gentleman, Matthew from Hershey, got caught in the Chicago weather yesterday, so he's not coming in until a little bit later today. But you've got the 3 of us. But it's always fun to do these panels because it brings 3 people that just met and allows us to really collaborate and bring some thinking together in what we all love, and that's marketing. So to introduce here to my left, I have Michael Reynolds. Michael's from the Campbell Soup Company, Integrated Marketing Manager. And then over here on my far left, I have Bonnie Brannigan from Kalmbach Feeds, which we're going to learn more about both of those brands. Kalmbach, 60-year-old-ish brand, right? Yep. And then, of course, Campbell's a 100-plus-year-old brand. So just to build on everything that we've been talking about this morning so far, media fragmentation, audiences, data, how all of that fuels the top of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel, and all of that fun stuff. So, Bonnie, let's go ahead and start with you first. Just looking at the funnel and the consumer path and all the data that it generates. At Kalmbach, which maybe you could start by giving a little intro on Kalmbach, how do you guys use that data, and do you focus more upper funnel as far as working with audiences and filling it, or more the lower funnel with conversions?
Thank you, Tim. Just to give you a little introduction to Kalmbach Feeds, we are a family-owned, fast-growth animal feed company. So we feed animals. I'd like to say if it has a face, we will feed it. But we focus mostly in the agriculture space, and my focus specifically is mostly on horses, performance horses and chickens. Do you know anyone who has chickens in their backyard? Most everybody does. Somewhere between 2 to 4% of households in America have backyard chickens. And on the horse side, it's another very big area where I focus. And we have a performance brand called Tribute Equine Nutrition. Anyone a horse person in the audience? Okay, terrific. So, and we have a handful of brands that serve the backyard poultry audience. So anyway, we have very specific targeted audiences, as you can imagine. It would not be likely for us to run mass media advertising. There would be a lot of waste there. So what we tend to focus on, because we are growing, we are regional, and we don't have full distribution, we tend to focus on top of the funnel metrics, brand awareness, brand attitudes, perceptions, and that sort of thing in our advertising. We do have a couple of core markets that are further along in that funnel, so then we do start to look at the conversions, if you will, and performance, sales.
Perfect. All right, Michael, so integrated market, we talked a little bit over drinks last night. It was interesting, you know, you said you're actually more of a consultant for a lot of the brand managers. So could you talk a little bit about that and just your role with the Campbell Soup Company and how all that works, and then we can get into some more questions.
Sure. What I do at Campbell's is more like I mentioned, a consultancy is because we have a center of excellence. So Campbell's right now is divided into 2 business units. We have our snacking business, which is Pepperidge Farm, Goldfish, Milano Cookies, et cetera, and Snyder's Lance, which is the pretzels, Cape Cod chips, kettle chips, as well as Meals and Beverage, which is obviously soup, which is our naming, Campbell Soup, Prego, Pacific, Swanson Broth, V8, Plum Organics, et cetera. Now, where I sit is in this little mini world of digital and other marketing service capability, where we sit across the enterprise. And what we do is we work with the brands. We get an idea of what the brand objectives are, what the strategic goals are, their marketing objectives, and then I come in and try to help them with the role of digital. I'm split into basically 4 parts. I'm on the consumer connections team. So the consumer connections team is as we try to break down silos that a lot of CPG companies are going through. I heard PepsiCo speak about it a little bit. Is break down silos. How do we have one look at the consumer journey, and how do we leverage that data across? So we're not talking to 16 different moms, as all the brands are trying to do, and realize that there's literally one mom that serves all the brand services. I do digital strategy and partnerships, so that's more the consultancy role. I come in and try to figure out how do we leverage e-com, social media, online, and experiential for the brand to spend money more efficiently. And then innovation, digital innovation for Campbell's is more like bringing them back into this current century and doing things like that. 150-plus-year-old company, so you can imagine we're still doing banner ads. And then just building the digital capability in-house. A lot of our brand managers are more general managers, per se, and I think one of the presenters earlier said it very well. Digital marketing is not a thing. Marketing is digital in this age, so just trying to raise their capabilities as well.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Michael, you mentioned just the consumer journey. So from your seat, looking at the digital side, website side, so walk us through a little bit, kind of maybe just the macro stages of that from Campbell's perspective of, bringing that consumer into, that consumer path and sort of walking them all the way through and kind of holding their hands to get them into the retailer.
Sure. This has been a year-plus journey for me leading this consumer journey work. What we're trying to do, like I mentioned, is break down silos. And so we've come up with a consumer connections toolkit way across the enterprise, so we can leverage actually the size of our company for more good than bad. So I think the way we look at it is trying to build that customer lifetime value. So if you think about it, we have brands from baby food with Plum Organics all the way up to V8 Original, which is 65 plus. So how do we keep that consumer across? So as we looked at it, we come with I know it seems a little bit generic to this day, but 5 stages. You have inspire, discover, consider. Why am I blanking? purchase and give me that. Buy and repurchase. Thank you. Sorry, but how we looked at it is more macro. Is we start with a consumer mindset map. So this what we did is we worked with our insights team and we broke down all the information that's been done, all the data and analytics we've gotten across the enterprise, and then we've built personas and we've built different consumer segmentation across the board, across all the different brands. After you find out where your consumer's mindset is and get a better understanding of who you're trying to target and talk to, you map them along the consumer journey, develop the one moment that your brand has best value proposition, and then it leads to a comms framework. So what we've been trying to do is pass that along through all the brands, feed it through, and it's been built a lot of efficiencies. A lot of brands have been able to partner with each other and et cetera, so it's been really good. It's been a year journey, though.
Okay, perfect. All right, Bonnie. So transparently, I live in the horse capital of the world, Kentucky, but I have not worked on any horse-related brands, so I'm anxious to hear a little bit more about this. So from your perspective, playing more in the awareness consideration part of the funnel, we had some email communication last week just about targeting, I think, horse owners is how you said it, right? So how are you guys, from a retail marketing perspective, identifying those horse owners? Are you working with third-party data providers? Are you leveraging your first-party data?
I wish we had third-party data. No, we do have affiliations with horse organizations. There is a very large event I was just talking with Andrew about called the A Quarter Horse Congress. It's the largest horse event in the world, and it's in Columbus, Ohio, right where we are located, and we are the official feed sponsor there. So we have affiliations and sponsorships with organizations that help us tap into the horse owner. But we also have to do our own research and generate our own data. So through research, we can understand their attitudes and usage, where they buy the product. Horse feed is an extremely technical and high research product. You know how people are getting more technical about and more research driven about their dogs and their dog food? Take that and put it on steroids. Horse feed, people are extremely high involvement process. So with our website, it's a lot of information because people are searching for a lot of technical information. In fact, I have a staff member who does almost half of her job is talking one-on-one with horse owners to help them find the exact right product for them, which is pretty amazing. So how do we find them? We find them through our various channels of the events we sponsor. We also sponsor notable riders who help us open up their channels to them. And we can find them through, one of our segments is horse racing, for example, so we know who the trainers are and so forth. So it's pretty targeted and pretty, that's not the most difficult part, finding them.
All right, so at Empower, we talk a lot about media and message and just the importance of them aligning. And in today's day and age with the data that's available, it's a lot easier than it ever has been, but yet it's still challenging. So I'll let you both sort of take this one. Whoever wants to go first, chime in. But how are you guys leveraging the data to help make sure that, whatever the advertising is, to make sure that that message is relevant for the consumer? Are you customizing, et cetera?
How we leverage the data. I think it's a challenge for us. It's a challenge. Traditionally, we put it through all like the advertising tests, et cetera. But I think what we've been focusing now is getting more real results, and I think we leverage third-party data more than anything, especially being in the digital space. But social listening is a huge thing for us. We like to build little communities within our networks and different things, and we test our ads there a lot. So we get more real feedback. We always believe that people that will talk about your brand will always be the most upfront honest, especially when they're sharing it with their internal community. So that's been a big shift in how we look at our messaging instead of the traditional, sending out for testing and getting that back. I think another way we've done is being more diverse. We have a lot of networks within our organization. So we have like a LGBTQ network, we have a Black, Hispanic, etc. like that. So bringing them in as we test different advertisings first to get their opinions before we go down that route has been a huge help. A lot of things we've done in partnerships with Pride and et cetera, we've leveraged our open network more than anything. And I think what it's showing is a different way of thinking for Campbell's, and that sometimes real human interaction and real human testament is more important. And I think we've found a healthy balance between the two.
Okay, great.
As the gentleman from Pepsi said, sometimes you don't have you don't have perfect data, you don't have real-time insight, and that's really true for us. Our products are not sold in traditional mass retail, so we don't capture sales tracking and that sort of thing. So what can we do? What can we track? Again, we can track geographic sales progress, we can track individual retailer progress, but a lot of our data usage is really at the top of the funnel again, and we do research when we're doing product development. We do research when we're doing packaging development. In fact, we did a qualitative study on some packaging testing, and it really drove the key points that we wanted to make on that package. It uncovered some things that were very important to the woman who buys our products that we would not have known. So that was terrific.
Okay. Perfect. All right, so let's talk a little bit about just media in general and the media fragmentation that's out there. We know that, to reach consumers today, you've got to communicate in a lot of different ways. So from each one of your guys' perspectives, and I know yours is going to be a little swayed digital just because of your given role, but are there any newer platforms, newer media offerings, newer tactics that you guys have tested? And if so, what are some of your learnings that you can share with the group? And these could be things like, advanced TV, addressable TV, any newer forms of digital marketing, anything like that you can share?
Okay. We've tried recently working with a partner, and their tool is called Venue Replay. And what it can do is you can put a geo-fence around a venue, and you can capture the IP and dates. So anything back 6 months ago, you can go and capture a venue, put in those dates. And so for those large horse events, we can go and grab IP addresses from devices that were in that venue during that time when there were several 100,000 people on site. And then we can serve ads to them and engage with them now that they're home. So it's going back in time and capturing the IP addresses of who were at that venue as long as 6 months ago. So you can do that on an ongoing basis. But you can also go back in time. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it's really interesting to see the kind of click-through rates. I mean, I know it's digital advertising and PPC, but it's very interesting for us to see how we can build awareness for those people who were in the venue and now are at home, and you can serve ads on all of their devices in that home.
For me, and I'll let you know about the results sooner than later, but I should probably get an email pretty soon. But programmatic out-of-home is something that we're working with a lot on our V8 brands. It's been a rough start to it, and it's a very new thing for me. But I think as we realize that people spend less time in the house and watching television, we've been leveraging with two of our V8 brands, the traditional, we call it Red, but our original, in different like health clinics and things for like where seniors would go to, and on the screens there, as well as one of our newer products, V8 Hydrate, in gyms and different things, and also in hydration stations. We've been playing, one of the cool things we've been playing with is a beverage that rehydrates you from a little bit too much drinking, get over those hangovers, etc. So a little, that's my little baby there, so I'm proud of that. But programmatic out-of-home is something we're trying to play into a little bit more, and results pending. We'll see.
Okay, perfect. Well, I can geek out a little bit about that with you. We actually, you're going to hear TD talk about this a little bit in Jack Link's presentation, but we did Burgermatic out of home for them for the first time this year. So kind of going back to my media and message question with that specific example, are you guys, because of those different locations and reaching, desired audiences, are you tailoring the messaging for those locations, or are you doing sort of a, very specific product message?
No, definitely tailored. I think one of the big things that I'm happy about in this new digital world is the access to data, and so as it comes in, we're trying to be as personalized as possible. There's been so many studies done on like how much more receptive consumers are when the message is more tailored, more personalized. So as the data comes in, we've been tailoring the message. We've been testing, A/B testing different messages throughout. So we. I think in the PepsiCo presentation they mentioned this as well, as moving more of the audience-centric consumer first instead of the traditional pushing the brand message out. So we've been letting the consumer speak to us and then telling them what they want to hear and in the language they want to hear it. So I think that's a big push for us as well.
Awesome. Well, I want to save a few minutes for questions here, but I from the audience. But I have one last question, and it's just a very general question, so you can answer it however you want. Looking out to the future, what's one thing that excites you about marketing? Could be anything advertising, marketing related.
Okay. I'm going to say two things. One, for us in our work that is really exciting is that we are working into neuroscience to peel back the layers of the reasons why people buy and how the different parts of the brain make the decision. Apparently, you like to think that your logical brain is making those decisions for buying the products, and it's based on the explicit benefits because this product has this feature that is really important to you, but really the underlying subliminal limbic brain and reptilian brain are actually driving those decisions. And so we're peeling back the layers with qualitative research to understand what is really the need that consumer has. Back to, the brands, we're good at covering off quality, safety, and trust, and what's next? What is the meaning of that brand? And it's really interesting research. It's going to uncover for us what is the gap and the implicit need that consumer really is trying to fill with this purchase. We tend to think of the horse owner as having a very strong emotional bond with their horse. What is that emotional bond? What is at the root of it, so that we can speak to those parts of the brain? So that's personally very exciting. And briefly, in terms of looking out on the future, I've been a marketer for 30 years, and when I started, it was all about creative and pretty pictures and beautiful words and all. And I really love the idea that we are really converging the art and the science in marketing are really, really exciting.
For me, it's I think two things as well. I think, really, like I mentioned prior, the access to data. I think personalization is super key, and as you think about a company as old as ours, and with the rise of private label and other DTC things, is connecting with the consumer and building that brand connection and be able to communicate it in a personalized way is how we're going to survive. White label doesn't do that, and we really believe our DTC, though it's not in delivery, it's direct to consumer connection, right? So how do we build that trust within the consumer and find a place in their lives? And then AI and machine learning, I think, as that continues to push in that technological advances, it's like how much more less of work I have to do to be completely candid. And I think we're moving to a place where a lot of this work and a lot of the messages coming from the brand can be automative. And I think that's going to be very helpful, especially as we continue to push and push and push and push with all the messages and as we communicate to the consumers.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Do we have time for questions, Steve?
We do. Questions? Yep.
Hi, it's Mark from Prestige Consumer Healthcare. How you doing? This question's kind of for Michael, but also for the Pepsi guys and really everybody here, is as we talk about data and targeting and personalization, all these great idealized ad experiences or marketing experiences, but you're working with all these brand managers, how often do they come back to you and say, that's all great, but what about my mass reach and my baseline awareness and my $5 CPM?
Oh, man. No, I think the target, the better the audience, and the better the return. And I think that's how we preach it to them. And I think as we work with these brand managers that literally live a day in life where it's all about their brand, and they wake up and breathe and live it. I think it's making them understand that the more we know about a consumer or the more information we can gather, the more we can then be proactive within, and we got to move from renting. I call it, we have to move from renting eyeballs to owning them. And I think that's just the reality we live in. It costs a lot of money to continually reach all these same people over and over. But what data does is it gives you an opportunity to own those eyes, and what it does is lower the cost, but also raises the impact. And if you think about customer lifetime value, is the more eyeballs you own, the more people you have that you can speak to for free.
Yeah, and I would add to it, just from a planning perspective, it's balance. I think you have to balance them out. There isn't a day that doesn't go by that I don't get that same very question from clients. And you have to look at the one-to-many and the one-to-one and really try to balance that out and figure out what's right for whatever your objective is.
How much of this process is forcing each of you to bring more of this in-house? In order to stay fleet, in order to have control of the data, how has this changed your relationship with agencies, and how much of this you're doing in-house and how much you're outsourcing?
I mean, the reason why I have the job I have is because of this. And I think Campbell's are traditionally brand marketers, GMs, and everyone had their own agency, et cetera, and there was no need for a center of excellence and things like that. But as these changes are happening in the consumer landscape, it's forced us to go out and create a marketing services arm of the business. And I think the reality is you need specialists. And I think, and the way it works in our world is the brand's responsible for the brand health, and then the specialists are responsible for the activation side of it. So we've brought a lot of this work in-house, and is now leverage agencies more in a consulting way or just for creative. So a lot of times it's us making the decision, and it's easier for us to hone in onto what's best for our brands and not necessarily with we used to let the agencies dictate, I guess, how our strategies were.
We believe that in-house, but we tap into agencies as consultants, agencies for creative. We're owning it.
Bonnie, I wanted to pick up on one of your points about needing to about investigating what brand means and the different tools you're using now to research brands. How are you in relationship to your competitive set? Where are you in relation to the competitors, and how do you break through with that sense of broader meaning and brand impact against a competitor?
A great question. We are a challenger brand. We're really a startup. We're 15 years old, and we're the fastest growing brand when I talk about our horse feed brand. And our competitors are multinational organizations that are heavily vested in traditional marketing approach. And so we have green ground to go on. They have a lot bigger budgets and a lot more presence, huge brand awareness. But I look at it as kind of a David and Goliath thing. We've got to be nimble, strategic, and use the new tools. I was telling Nina earlier, I don't tend to look at our direct competitors so much to see what they're doing. I try to learn from the really great pet food brands, because that's really who I think we should be emulating, is some up-and-coming pet food brands.
Mike, Michael, you mentioned that having to fight against, the sort of the white labeling and needing to elevate brands. Are there specific brands within Campbell's that have sort of already achieved or are closer to achieving that special resonance with consumers that you're sort of using as a model for others to follow?
Right now, I think our the brand that gets the most love within the walls is probably Goldfish. I think they do a great job of differentiation and showing what value they have in their consumers' life. I think they have a very great understanding of who their consumer is and who their brand is and how where the synergies are with that consumer's life and what the brand can offer. And I also think they have been very good at being omni-centered, right? I think at all channels they show up the same way, whether it's digital, offline, online, et cetera. And I think they're like the gold standard, which annoys most people in the company, but that's how it is. I also think, but they also had the value of their brand that the people who grew up on Goldfish are now having kids. So now it's a brand that they're passed down. We have a lot of legacy brands at Campbell's. We could use the word legacy. You could use the word old, synonymous, that are trying to break that mold. And but that's like Goldfish is one of our gold standards, and I think Pacific broth is one of our Pacific Foods would be one of our other gold standards.
Tim is going to be extending this conversation in a roundtable at the end of the morning. Tim, Bonnie, Michael, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
It's a great, and let me ask Brandon up, because this is a great segue into our next presentation, talking about brand and the challenge of commoditization. Butter is butter, right? But no, Land O'Lakes' challenge has been to fight against that commoditization and to leverage its own history and the story of its own brand, and in order to reconnect with consumers and bring a different story, not only to consumers but to the entire supply chain that Land O'Lakes represents. Brandon Miller is going to talk to you about that story of Land O'Lakes that many of you may not know, but it's a fascinating one. We've had them here for over the last couple of years, coming at different aspects of the Land O'Lakes story, and how it all is centered in the origin of the company and the identity of the company and the way in which it's taking that story and bringing it out to consumers. Brendan Miller is the digital marketing manager at Land O'Lakes. He oversees he's the enterprise media lead who oversees the ways in which all of these investments are being made across media. Please welcome Brandon Miller.
Thank you, Steve. So, when Steve mentions that butter is butter and we talk about commoditization, the reason I've got March 4th, 1923 on the screen is that was when the federal government passed Title 29, Section 321A, which coded to law exactly the definition of what butter is. So that's actually a thing that's in our U.S. legal code somewhere. So when it comes to how much wiggle room do we have on the product, there's not a ton. And if that weren't enough, here we've got a table of classification standards from the USDA. So we've got the legislative branch. Let's follow it up with the executive branch. That's really going to be great. And this highlights all the different ways and things that go into the grading of butter flavoring, right? Like, so what kind of USDA grade do you get? I always think it's really interesting that, if you really go down to that far end of B there's a couple of things. You can get a slight taste of storage and old cream, I think. No, a definite taste of storage and old cream. And you can get a slight taste of mustiness, which is just fantastic. But so once we've made a product, and Land O'Lakes has been doing this for 100 years, once you make a product that's reached sort of the gold standard grade, well, what do you do from there, right? Like, we're not going to win. We've got some D2C brands coming. We've got some, all the major retailers are coming out with their own brands. We're not going to win on price, and we're in a commodity market. So what do you do? And the approach that we've taken is to really focusing on marketing ourselves and our history. And so, we are in an advantageous position in that we're not really a butter company. We sell butter, but we have industries that are much broader than that supporting it. And so everybody knows sort of the butter brand, but we also have an enormous multi-billion-dollar business that is animal nutrition. And so I bet you didn't expect to get 2 horse feed presentations in a row today, but it's happening. And Bonnie, I agree with everything you said, but I'll challenge you on the huge budgets that we've got for the for the horse feed programs. Other than that, we're in the same line of thinking. And then we've got, and it's actually interesting, within the animal nutrition business, we've actually got like an exotic animal feed, so like aardvark feed and rhinoceros feed and that kind of stuff. We got all that kind of stuff like in there. Oh yeah, awesome. And then, coupled onto that, a number of years ago, we acquired a company called Winfield United. So one of the biggest parts of our business is actually products helping farmers on the farm get as much yield as they can out of their crops. And so when you really line up the business units, you've sort of got, seed goes in the ground, we're helping the farmer there, crop grows, becomes feed, we've got a footprint there, and then ultimately, in the case of cows, it produces something that humans can consume. Awesome, you've got a farmer to fork kind of situation. And all of this, you've got a layer of technology on top of it where, as Bonnie mentioned, tons of research goes into this, tons of technology goes into the agricultural arena, and we've got all of that kind of stuff going on. And so one of the big things we want to do in order to differentiate ourselves is tell people about it, because most people don't really know that. They think of us as a butter company. On top of all of that, probably the biggest point that I'd love everybody to take away from Land O'Lakes is that we're a farmer-owned cooperative. And so we've been doing the cooperative thing since 1921, since before it was cool. And that's sort of something that you can't really fake. And so it's really something that we're leaning into. And so there's a little video here just that'll kind of show a little bit about how we're thinking about our cooperative.
Back in 1921, we did something crazy. We tore down our fences. Not the physical ones, but the metaphorical ones that stood between us and our neighbors. Because we believed that by working together, we could be better. And we were right. Together, we invented new ways to make our butter even better. We found innovative ways to conserve our land and protect our animals. We share ideas. We disagree. We figure it out. Then, we get back to work. And if 1,791 dairy farmers with different backgrounds, opinions, and beliefs can set aside our differences to make a perfect stick of butter, imagine what all 325 million of us could do. Land O'Lakes, a farmer-owned co-op, all together better.
And so by having that tight of a relationship with our farmer members, and we have like direct lines of communication with them, we really get to understand the things that we care about. And we've really cultivated that over the course of 100 years. And so I think what I'm going to do now for the time we've got left is I'm going to walk through a few case studies of, okay, these are some things that we care about in the agricultural community and what we've done to turn that into a differentiation point for us in what amounts to a commoditized market. So the first thing we care about, these are 3 of our farmer members, and it surprises some people to learn that 1 out of every 3 farms in America is led by a woman. And just about all of the rest have women in like really, really key roles, usually the finances of the farm. But that was something we found, hey, nobody knew that. So we wanted to in terms of like, let's put a campaign together, let's do something quick. We contracted with a up-and-coming country singer, her name was Maggie Rose, and we just sort of like put a little music video together where we flipped the script on the old paradigm of Old MacDonald being the suspender-wearing farmer guy. So instead of EIO, you've got she-IO. So I'm not going to show you the whole music. I'll show you a little bit of it. We won't show the whole music video for time's sake, but just try to not have this humming in your head at some point in the next.
Old MacDonald had a daughter. Look what she does with what he taught her. She's got the future in her hands, proud of roots of where she stands, working on a greater plan, showing us all she can do it, we can. Oh, yeah.
So super fun campaign, and the media, this is a media post crowd. The media extensions, a lot of them write themselves. There's some Vivo, there's a little bit of streaming audio, those kinds of things, and very well received. Like people responded overwhelmingly favorably to it. Switching gears to another, I love that picture. Switching gears to the animal nutrition business, as I think Bonnie will probably agree. One of the things we've really come to care about and understand that our farmers care about is their animals, right? And in a lot of ways, particularly when it comes to horses, they treat those animals like members of their family, right? And so we were thinking, we had ran into a lot of the same, and we still do, run into a lot of the same, third-party data isn't great for horse ownership. I get a lot of recommendations for, hey, let's do lookalike modeling for horse ownership. And I'm like, I don't care if you look like a horse owner. You own a horse or you don't. That's it. It's not a whole lot more complicated than that. But so we were thinking, okay, well, what could we do to maybe figure out who some of the past and present and potentially future horse owners were? And so we came up with this Find Your Old Friend campaign idea. And this was this was not huge budget at all, and it was one of my favorite social activations that we've ever done. So what it amounted to was, so we did a little bit of media to draw people in, and then basically it was as simple as we created a Facebook group where we introduced horse owners to each other and encouraged them to help try to find, like if someone had lost their horse, try to find it through the 6 degrees of separation, sort of a Kevin Bacon-like thing. How can I get to my horse ownership? And the beautiful thing about this, we funded it for 2 months where we did some seeding media. It has carried on in our absence. And they've sort of, this I think was like 4 hours ago, somebody posted a few pictures of this was a horse that they, had at one point in time. She doesn't know where it is now. They had to sell the farm. Then people comment, and even if they can't find it immediately, it's still a community that says, hey, we're rooting for you. Good luck finding it. Please, let us know. Let us report back if you find it. And, at the end of the day, we have made quite a number of reunions between previous owner and current horse. And we've actually been able to turn some of that into more ad content. So we don't have to create a ton of videos. We just, went rough and dirty and filmed a few videos showing what happens in that moment. And I think this is an example of some of the content that we made coming out of this social, social activation. I think that this is Dusty.
Dusty was just a loving horse. How long it's been to see him? I should say about 15 years as far as it goes. Well, ever since that, I was always wondering where he went.
Dusty has brought so much joy and so many good things into my life. Somebody had mentioned the Purina Find Your Friend group, and I got to thinking that if he meant that much to me, that Dusty's old owner probably had the same connection.
Boy, let me kiss him, put my head up against his head. I think he remembered me, I really do. Wish I had him back. It made tears go in my eyes.
I just love that. And, we talk a lot, and, we're going down the same journey as a lot of CPGs here, and it's all great work about, getting your data tech stack set up, and we've got to optimize and find the right targets, and we've got to do all those things. But what's the value to the brand of those two people, one, and then anybody that sees that story? There's something fundamental about it. And again, that wasn't it wasn't free, but it wasn't a horribly expensive campaign to put together. So I think there's definitely still room for emotion as we're doing this targeting stuff. So hard pivot, We can let's go from the depressing topic of reintroducing. Let's get even more depressing about where are we going to find enough food to feed 9 billion people? So, depending on who you ask, somewhere between 2030 and 2050, we're going to have 9 billion people on this planet, and we're not exactly sure how we're going to feed them all. If you took a pin and put it in agriculture today, as it exactly exists today, with the organic stuff going on, some urban farming trends, and then all of the sort of industrial farming that's going on, you'd still need about 2 million-ish square acres to feed the rest of those people, which, for a little bit of context, the United States is a little under 4 million square acres, so about half of the U.S., kind of, in terms of land mass. Not super practical. A big part of what we've been doing at Land O'Lakes, again, this is all getting back to how we sell butter, we're trying to tackle this problem as well, because we know one of the biggest part of the reasons why there's not enough food even currently to feed people, it's not a production issue, it's a supply chain and logistics issue generally. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how can we help in that arena. And a place, so this was an activation, so we're in a unique position to lead. And one of the places as a marketing team, I think I threw this in here. Yeah, I did. So this is part of the business. This is just one example within our crop inputs business of something that's pretty interesting. So this is Winfield United. It's our answer plot program. So we have sections of land all over the country at different longitudes, latitudes, topographies, different rain and climate conditions, all those kinds of things. And then we're doing basically A/B tests like we would with banner ads, but with crops all over the country, and then that data streams back in to sort of feed our products, right? And so part of the answer to 9 billion is to keep improving yield on the existing acres that we've got, so that we don't have to resort to finding 2 million square acres more. So that's what's going on with the business. But when it comes to the marketing team, what can we do with the fact that we're putting a lot of time and energy into this? And so we actually, for the past couple of years, we've had a presence at South by Southwest, where we're taking a thought leadership position, and we've had a house down there where we've brought in industry leaders and panelists. And actually, this most recent year, we actually did a mini VC round where student entrepreneurs could bring in, hey, solve the food supply challenge for us, and we'll fund you and support your venture. And so I think it's yet another way for us as Land O'Lakes to get out all of these stories that we're doing. And I think a lot of your brands probably have hidden gems of stories. And that's really what we've been leaning on in this sort of commoditization. So here's just a quick video about what we did at South by. I like this one. It doesn't have too much substance in it, none of the deep stuff or heavy stuff. But it's weird to think of a butter brand, your grandmother's baking butter brand, being at South by Southwest. The Instagram thing, you got to have a ball pit or something for Instagrammableness. And so that was a big tentpole event where we brought forward okay, this is how we're tackling the food supply chain, and we do a lot of stuff. As I'm sure you're all well aware, all of most of the media companies today have a content studio. So we've done a lot of those kinds of things too, where we bring our PhDs and our experts and some of our researchers to work with them. And the reason I shared this example was because, obviously this is the only time I'm going to talk about metrics. With this particular example, we made some interactive articles that leaned heavily on a lot of the work we'd been doing on the supply chain stuff. And like this was one of those pre-post survey deals, and our rating as a forward-thinking brand went from under 40% to over 90. And I think, like, again, we all know that there's limitations to some of these studies, but I think the big thing that we took away was that was the biggest jump I had ever seen, and we had to go back and like ask them, hey, did you mess this up, the methodology? It turns out they didn't, and we think that the reason that we could achieve results like that had to do with the fact that we were authentically bringing forward the things that we know about, and so that's why we think that was a big deal. Now, okay, so dear media metrics, allow me to introduce you to reality. So as we sort of wrap this up, obviously, as we're doing media programs, as we're buying any kind of marketing programs, we have a lot of our metrics, but in true farmer fashion, there are a lot of things going on that are outside of our control and our farmers' control. And so, so I put a few of these up here, but just to give you a sense of the landscape today. So 3 weeks ago, I mean, as everyone's certainly aware, whatever your position is on it, farmers are being played in the middle of a game right now, and China, our biggest buyer of soybeans, is not taking any of them. That's not good for any of our farmers in the short run. Let's throw on top of that, we had record flooding throughout the Midwest start out this year. So in places like Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, they didn't get planted until way late in the season, dropping commodity prices. And then and then let's throw on top of that, milk prices as a commodity have been low for about 5 years. So you couple all that stuff together, and I think the stat is in 2018, and I think it's extended into 2019, in just the state of Wisconsin, 2 dairy farms closed their doors every day, presumably never to reopen. And so I think the reason I kind of close with this is to sort of say, one, if you happen to know a farmer, give them a hug, because they could probably use it right about now. But two, as we're doing marketing communications, we think it's really important to tell their story and to bring this forward because,